Welcome to Real Truth Real Quick. My name is Adam Tarnow, joined as always by Todd Wagner.
Hello, Adam. Hello, friends.
All right, Todd, question is this. What is a biblical view of how to discipline my children?
All right. Well, let's talk about discipline. We have done another Real Truth Real Quick on spanking, where we answer questions that people bring in and or email into us, and people ask, hey, as a Christian parent, should I ever use corporal punishment? And so we answered that. I think it'd be a tragedy if somebody watched that and thought we were answering this question. Right? Which is, what's a holistic biblical view on disciplining my children? If your view of disciplining your children always involves spanking, that's going to be problematic.
Yeah.
So we made a big deal in that episode about never spanking out of anger or in any way physically abusing your child. But I would also say if all of your parental discipline involves spanking, you're probably lazy and not very thoughtful. All right? So let's answer this question. What's a biblical view to discipline my children? All right? Watch the other one so you know that spanking is not out, but maybe how to think about it in a way that's biblical. On this one, what I would just say is when I look at the discipline of the Lord, and God's our model in all things, right? The purpose of discipline is training. The root of the word discipline has in it the word disciple. And the word disciple in Scripture doesn't mean believer, it means learner.
Yeah.
All right? And so you're trying to teach your children something. And specifically, you're trying to teach them that there's a consequence to living the life of a fool. So let's talk about a few things. First of all, if the Lord's our example in all things, when God was approached by Moses in Exodus chapter 34, and Moses said, God, show me a glimpse of you. Who are you? God responds by saying this, well, I'll tell you who I am. I'm compassionate. I'm gracious. I'm slow to anger. I'm abounding in loving kindness and truth. And it goes on from there.
Yeah.
But you have to think about that as a parent. All right, when you start your discipline, if you don't start out of a heart for your child of love, a desire to see them grow into the full measure of a man or a woman, your goal is not to have obedient children. Your goal is to raise healthy adults. You're trying to teach your kids that there is a consequence to the choices they make. There's a choice in life in everything you do, but in the end, the choices you make, they're the ones that make and shape you.
Yeah.
And so you're teaching kids not to lean on their own understanding, but hopefully in all their ways acknowledge God, because that's what's going to make their path straight. So Proverbs 19:18 says, discipline your son or your daughter while there is hope, while they're still learning, right? And do not desire his death. If you just let your kids just wander aimlessly, right? It's been famously said, I think, that rules without relationship produces rebellion.
Right.
But I will tell you, relationships where there is no rules is going to produce chaos in the life of that child. Children need boundaries. So here's just something, as you talk about a biblical philosophy of children, is that children do childish things. And you have to differentiate in your philosophy of parenting between, is this a childish mistake or is this a foolish mistake? All right, so what's the difference between those two? A childish mistake is one that's made out of ignorance. It's one that's made out of a lack of information. It's one that's made because they've never had a chance to learn before. And a foolish mistake is, I know what you've told me. I know what you've said is right. I know what respectful order is, and I don't care. All right? And so when a person makes a childish mistake, you want to be a whole lot more compassionate and slow to anger, filled with grace and abounding loving kindness. But when you start to see foolishness kick in, all right, that's where your discipline should be like the Lord's, who is our example in all things. And so obviously, Real Truth Real Quick is bracketed with time. So I'm not going to, we've talked for hours on this. We'll put links in our show notes. We've done parenting conferences talking about this. But high level, what I would say is your disciplining, your parental discipline ought to be patient. It ought to be progressive, and it ought to be purposeful.
All right, so unpack those real quickly.
Okay, so the patient one is first, don't do stuff because you're lazy or because you're embarrassed or because you don't ever want your child to be a child. Okay, he's a child.
Yeah.
Now, when they start to be a fool, you want to make sure you move from being patient to being a little bit more progressive. There's a verse, it's kind of obscure, but I remember I was reading in the prophet Hosea a long time ago, and there was this interesting statement by God in Hosea chapter 5, verse 12. And he talks about how he's bothered by Ephraim, which is representative of the 12 tribes in the north, the larger group of people of Israel. So God's people. And he says, you've become people that don't respect basically what I've put in order. And they were doing some things that God says we shouldn't do, specifically moving the boundaries of widows and others. And so he says, I will be like a moth to Ephraim and rottenness to Judah, which is the southern part. And so what he's saying there is, hey, like there's nothing quite so annoying as a moth, right? Like, it's kind of in your face.
There's one in my bathroom right now.
Okay, and you just want to bat it down. Like that's annoying. It's not as it should be. And so what God's basically doing is he's saying, hey, I'm going to bring a little trouble into your life. Yeah. And so it's patient. A moth is not the worst thing that can come into your bathroom. What could be worse? How about a lion? Right? If a lion comes in your bathroom, you're going to know, okay, something's not right for sure. And that's actually where God goes. All right, so let me just go to the Judah part where it says there'll be like rottenness. That's a picture of like disease, or if you will, an infection that just it hurts, it throbs a little bit, but you're going to be okay if you treat it right. But you ignore it, right? Or what's worse than a little nick that gets infected is like if a ravenous animal bites your arm. That's real trouble. And so what he does say, okay, is that I'm going to be at first like a moth or rottenness to Ephraim and Judah, but then they're not going to listen. What they did is they ran away from God. They tried to make some alliances. It's not really important, except that he says then when he gets to verse 14, I'm going to be like a lion. Not a little moth you can bat away and it's annoying. God says, I'm going to be unavoidable trouble in your life because your foolishness, because I love you, I'm going to discipline you, okay? So that your life will not be filled with chaos and real destruction. Because eventually, this is what happens to a child or to a person that just rejects, if you will, the discipline of the Lord. Proverbs 29:1. It says, he who hardens his neck after much reproof will suddenly be broken beyond remedy. So patient at first, progressive, and purposeful.
Yeah.
The purpose of discipline is so that you can raise up your child in the way and the fear of the Lord, so that it may go well with them. You'll see that again and again and again in Scripture. Discipline is not for you as a parent. It's because you love your child and you want them to learn that disobedience is going to cause great trouble in their life, and that in all the ways of the Lord there is peace. Yeah. So that would be my quick philosophy on how to discipline your child with the purpose of conforming them to the image of Jesus Christ. All right, make them a disciple of good and right and true, not somebody that you can be proud of at the grocery store. In that little moment where you intimidate them and lazily, move towards them. That wouldn't be a good parenting technique.
No, but I want them to behave at the grocery store.
Yeah, who doesn't? I don't want to knock them with pickle jars. Yeah, right. But if they do, let's be patient. Was that a childish mistake, or are they just fools because they're in there running around and being careless about other people's property?
I like that. Great answer, Todd. Thank you so much. Check out those show notes for other helpful links. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Hey friends, thanks for watching that episode of Real Truth Real Quick, where I try and give answers to life, leadership, and the world we live in. We love doing this because it's a great way to push forward biblical truth and equip the saints. Hey, do us a favor and subscribe to our channel, which you can do by hitting up YouTube or just hit the link in the show notes below.